Keep listening for This Just In from Outdoors, environmental news from the Monterey Bay, only on KZSC Santa Cruz.
KZSC.
Now, young fellas, been having a lot of fun around here today, haven't you? You know what makes this all possible? This forest around us. We should all be thankful for our forest.
You're tuned in to This Just In from Outdoors. Thanks. Today we hear about the educational work of the Ken Norris Center for Natural History. With environmental news headlines and more, stick around.
This Just In
From Outdoors. In San Francisco's historic Embarcadero district, people ride bikes, eat at waterfront restaurants, and stroll on piers that jut into San Francisco Bay. But rising seas pose serious flooding threats to the Embarcadero. Already during extra high tides, water spills over a century-old seawall onto sidewalks. And as sea levels rise, high tides and storm waves could threaten buildings, subway tunnels, and other infrastructure. To show how sea level rise could affect the Embarcadero and two other San Francisco locations, a nonprofit called Climate Access created an app called Look Ahead. It allows users to explore a virtual reality simulation of the flooding that's likely if carbon pollution continues unchecked.
What we're trying to do is create the real visceral experience.
Director of Innovation Lauren Graham says the app is not just about doom and gloom. It also shows a scenario where carbon pollution has been sharply reduced, and the city has made adaptations, such as raising and strengthening the Embarcadero seawall.
It's showing an alternative. So it's not a fatalistic approach, it's really an inspirational approach.
That shows how climate action can help protect the places we love.
Campuses across the UC system are competing in the Cool Campus Challenge that started on April 1st. The challenge aims to see which UC location can do the most to combat climate change and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The challenge is meant to increase engagement in the culture of sustainability and environmentally friendly practices. All students, faculty, and staff can engage in the challenge. Sustainability Director Elita Erickson says, when we did this contest in 2015, UCSC participants saved 2,655 metric tons of CO2, equivalent to over 560 passenger vehicles driven for 1 year. The challenge will showcase actions people can take to be more green, such as shutting off computer monitors that are not in use or taking public transportation. So far, UCSC has cut down on over 253 tons of CO2, equivalent to 54 passenger vehicles. It is not too late to participate. Both individuals and teams can compete to win, and you can still sign up at coolcampuschallenge.org.
We are officially 1 year out from the 2020 census, and officials in Santa Cruz and Watsonville are ramping up to ensure that every possible individual is counted to avoid a loss of funding to the state. The decennial census is significant because it not only provides basic population information, but also informs the distribution of $675 billion of federal funds. As of now, Watsonville County's budget consists of $138 million in federal funding. These funds are allotted to healthcare, housing, road funding, and the aid of low-income citizens. For every person that is not counted in the census, $2,000 will be lost. The mayors of Santa Cruz, Watsonville, Scotts Valley, and Capitola met last Tuesday night in preparation for the impending census. They acknowledged the fact that California is at a huge risk for an undercount because of its high number of traditionally hard-to-count communities. These communities consist of undocumented immigrants, renters, those without internet access, the homeless, people in poverty, and young children. KZSC spoke to Paulina Moreno of the Community Action Board of Santa Cruz County about the issues at hand and the steps being made to make sure every person is counted.
My name is Paulina Moreno. I am the project director of the Thriving Immigrants Initiative and the Census Project, and I work for Community Action Board of Santa Cruz County. We're piloting in South County to not only bring additional resources like legal services to the immigrant community, but also engage in advocacy and messaging around immigration in Santa Cruz County. And I say that the programs are directly linked with the census work because part of our effort is ensuring that we're bringing additional resources. And we know the consequences of getting a low count or low response rate in Santa Cruz County, what that means for us as agencies that receive federal funding to provide services to the community at large here in Santa Cruz.
She also spoke to the matter of if undocumented immigrants will be counted in the census.
We engage in a complete and accurate count for census, and irrespective of what area people were born in or whether they're documented or not, this is an opportunity to be counted and be reflected on the population that makes up Santa Cruz County.
She addressed the obstacles that the Community Action Board and the rest of Santa Cruz are facing in conducting an accurate and complete census. One of these obstacles is the Citizenship Question, which has been put on the census again under the Trump administration.
This is the first year that they're pushing for doing an online self-response, which brings up some challenges due to the technology gap in our county. There's also very real challenges. We've been hearing for a number of months back and forth about the Citizenship Question, which could potentially deter people from participating. We have what we're calling Santa Cruz County Complete Count Committee, and we're meeting once a month to talk about these issues and to bring attention to the need to apply for those census jobs, because we definitely want to make sure that people in the community are being hired to be part of those doing the canvassing, the door-to-door knocking and follow-up.
KZSC also spoke to Ryan Coonerty, the 3rd District Supervisor of Santa Cruz County.
Census is incredibly important, both because it gives us a record that then indicates levels of federal funding. So it's about $2,000 lost to this community per year for every person that we don't count. It also determines political representation in Congress and other places. I mean, we see undercounts in a number of subpopulations. One is undocumented people. Another one is students, because they tend to move households frequently.
Coonerty is also actively working against an undercount occurring.
It also impacts the number of representatives who are apportioned into the Congress, and so that can also cause California specifically to have less representation in Congress than we otherwise would have. Making sure we count everybody has been under attack by the Trump administration for both racist and policy reasons, and so they're really trying to limit resources and instill fear in these communities. So we're building a really broad coalition of both all the local governments, but then nonprofit service providers, religious institutions, community groups, schools.
Coonerty also spoke of the benefits that could come from getting a total and complete census.
Everything, meals programs to make sure we're feeding families and seniors, to homeless shelters, providing shelters for those in need, to just supporting working families that are contributing to this community that may need extra help with childcare or food or health care. Those dollars mean a lot in our ability to provide services.
The next installment of the Agriculture History Project Spring Lecture Series is on April 18th. The speakers are Sierra Ryan, Jody Burgle-Koklo, Liz Brinbaum, and Katie Hansen, authors of Harvesting Our Heritage, Bite-Sized Stories from Santa Cruz History. The book explores topics ranging from crop change in the Pajaro Valley to hops and potatoes, sugar beets, and berries. The monthly series features members of the Pajaro agricultural community who highlight the history, challenges, successes, and efforts to preserve the valley's culture. To find out more information, visit aghistoryproject.org. The Kenneth S. Norris Center for Natural History supports natural history educational and research opportunities for the UC Santa Cruz students, faculty, staff, and all the communities in the Monterey Bay. The Norris Center hosts classes, natural history workshops, has a wide variety of specimens for teaching and research, and helps engage all people with the natural world. KZSC's News and Talk Director, Daniel Martinez, sat down with Luba Kaplanskaya, an intern with the Ken Norris Center, to find out more about the center and the legacy of Ken Norris.
My name is Luba Kaplanskaya. I'm a fourth-year student here at UC Santa Cruz, and I'm here today to talk about the Ken Norris Center for Natural History, which is located here on campus at UC Santa Cruz. I have a little bit more background on Ken Norris himself. The center is named after him. He's pretty significant. So he was a professor here at UC Santa Cruz. He was born in 1924 and died in 1998. And he was a leader and an activist and a really charismatic individual for the university itself, but also for the pioneering of this idea of natural history as a study, intertwining and connecting the ideas of art, science, politics, history, all together. He started the focus on field biology and research. He started the Long Marine Lab, which is down at Coastal Biology. He was basically a fighter for the preservation of land here on campus and throughout California. And much of what we see today around campus, upper campus, right, when you go for a walk, when you could cut from over here to the back of the trailer park and then go up to Wilder Ranch, is because of Ken Norris, because he was a fighter for preserving those lands. And he actually started the UC Natural Reserve System, which is a system of over 40 lands throughout the UC system. These lands are extremely valuable and important, not only for students and researchers who want to go there and conduct natural history or scientific observations, but also for people of all backgrounds, of artists, of policymakers who want to go there and experience these natural lands that are strictly for research and the enjoyment of the public, right? Of people who want to contribute to that. And this is UC Santa Cruz. The upper campus is a natural reserve. There's Rancho Marina. There's one in Big Sur, Big Creek. There's the Mojave Desert. And it's really thanks to Ken Norris that we have these lands, because he really pressured and got the UC Regents to sign off on preserving these lands. And since then, the lands have increased, and all the UCs share ownership of those lands. So it's really wonderful, all the positive impacts that he created that are still here today. So the Ken Norris Center, which is named after him.
Mm-hmm. What is natural history? Let's start with the sort of basic question, and then we'll go from there. What is natural history for, I guess, people out there that don't know? Because it sounds like something everyone should know.
Definitely. So it's a super broad term, right? Natural history, the study of nature, the history of nature. Nature seems like it's been sort of infinite, right? We're here on such a interesting, beautiful planet for a very short amount of time, but yet nature and the planet continues to move forward, even when we're not here. So natural history is the scientific study of animals, plants, and the environment. But what makes natural history different than just environmental studies or environmental science or ecology is that it's really the study of animals, plants, and science, but it's focused on observations rather than just experiments. So it's really about sitting down for long periods of time and being extremely mindful and using all your energy to focus on your specific area of study.
I was reading up about Ken Norris before you got here, and it's interesting you mentioned sitting for long periods of time. It said one of his core teachings was overcoming the threshold of boredom. So I guess that means sitting in nature and being uncomfortable, but then moving past that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So what's been your experience with that? Have you struggled and then gotten better with sitting and just becoming, I don't know, an observer? Or what's the process like when you do it?
So my favorite part about the idea and philosophy behind natural history is really closely intertwined for me with mindfulness and being truly present. I try to do that as many times throughout the day as I can, but it's pretty difficult with all the distractions that we have, especially having a device that tries to capture your attention in any way possible every second, 24 hours a day, because you're really the consumer and the product of media, right? Yeah. So I really admire natural history for the state that your mind enters when you can be fully present and realize the complete, utter beauty and awe that these things have that we just walk by on a day-to-day basis, flowering plants and bees buzzing around.
Yeah.
When you can really sit and look at them and understand the complexity that goes on around you every single second of the day that you have no control over and that you don't even maybe understand, it truly gives you this overall greater appreciation for life itself and for your life.
You mentioned the device thing, and that's good because I wanted to talk about that specifically. And I was curious, what's your take on technology in that sense?
I think that by having these devices and the internet and this access to it 24/7, we don't allow ourselves to be bored, and we view boredom as something that needs to be avoided, and we can take ourselves away from boredom instantly. Oh, you're bored? Just hop on your phone, talk to someone. But really, with boredom, I think comes concentration and super thinking, right? So thinking for a long amount of time deeply without distractions, which is what arises to new ideas. And we can't think of new ideas to better ourselves, to better the planet, to make profits or anything that you're trying to do unless you have ideas for that. If you're just living in this cycle day to day and not thinking of new ways, new innovations, then you're just going to be stuck where you are and you can't move forward.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about the activities that the Ken Norris Center engages in?
I am the CUIP coordinator for the Ken Norris Center, the Chancellor's Undergraduate Internship Program intern. I'm the outreach coordinator. Was started in 2014 by a large donation from someone who was a student of Ken Norris. And they wanted to start this center because basically as a thanks to Ken Norris for the way that he impacted their lives and countless amounts of people's lives. I always interact with community members and people that live in Santa Cruz that have very fond, wonderful memories with Ken Norris, because he also started this program, which is still here today, called the Natural History Field Quarter. It's every single spring, and basically the current instructor, Cruz, who's also the director of the Ken Norris Center, takes a group of students and they basically go camping for the entire quarter at the UC reserves, and they spend a lot of time learning about how to conduct natural history. They spend a lot of time by themselves looking at the environment and really observing their lands, and they also learn about land management and land use and the history of people who used to own those lands, and they have native speakers come and different scientists come. I haven't participated in that program, but from what I've heard from it, it's truly a life-changing experience. So that's one of the things that the Ken Norris Center does. In general, the biggest part of the Norris Center is that it's the school's natural history museum. So there are over 300,000 specimens, like a natural history museum, right? If you were to go to the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles or in any major city that has one, they're specimens of deceased plants or animals, and they are used as specimens for research and for art. So many people can't ever see an owl or an albatross right in front of them, unless maybe you work at a zoo. But these animals are hard to see, and we have specimens there for people to look at, to learn from, to draw, to paint. We offer a lot of different courses. So some of the courses that we offer, like I mentioned, the Natural History Field Quarter, which you apply for in the fall. There's field research classes. We have, for example, a natural history illustrations class this quarter where students get to choose what animals or plants they're interested in, and they learn how to draw them and how to accurately represent them.
Taxidermy. Can you tell me a little bit more about that in the setting of natural history? Do you wait for an animal to die and then taxidermize it? What's the philosophy behind that? Do you kill the animal so you can taxidermize it? And what are the sort of struggles between people in dealing with that? Yeah,
so the philosophy at the Norris Center, and I'm pretty sure most natural history museums, is that you find an animal that has been deceased for its own causes. Sometimes those reasons can be from humans, from hunters or people running animals over or things like that. But no, you definitely don't kill an animal for the sake of having it be a specimen. That's something that's important. And the relationship with it is that, well, shout out to all the people that bring in these animals, because all the species that we have were really from people who saw a dead animal, picked it up, put it in a bag or something, and then brought it over to the Norris Center. And I've definitely seen animals before, and my supervisor, Cruz, has said, oh, keep a trash bag in your car, in case you ever see a really cool animal that we don't have, just bring it over. And I wouldn't do that. That's not my style. That's not something I want to do. So I've seen people bring in boxes of animals, and they're out for a hike usually, or they're driving and they see a run over animal and they bring it in. And I think that the beauty of that is that we can use these bodies for science and for natural history. Of course, they could also be left out in nature and eaten by animals and be decomposed and used as energy for the soil or for rats or other birds. But there's definitely a proportion of it that I think is pretty sustainable, right? We don't over collect specimens that we already have. I can tell you off the bat, if there's a deceased raccoon, we don't ask for that, or we don't take it and we don't make it into taxidermy. There are tons of raccoons, I'm sure, at the Norris Center. The relationship with that, I think I've had a really interesting time interviewing the taxidermy team, because I was asking them those questions. How do you do that? How do you do this internship? Because they're just, a lot of people also don't wear gloves at the taxidermy thing, and they're just with their hands are digging into these bodies, and they just enjoy it. They find it as like a puzzle, because it's a very systematic process where you have to make sure that you don't harm the animal in this way and remove certain parts, and then you stuff it with certain materials and you have to let it dry. And I asked them what their favorite part was, and some people said that the final product is their favorite part, because you really see this gorgeous, huge barn owl, right? That a child could come in, because there's also the bird school project which works with the Norris Center, and this child from the school could come and never even have a clue what a barn owl looks like, and now see this marvelous, fascinating animal right before their eyes. So the relationship with it, I think, is complicated, and to each their own. I highly appreciate the taxidermy team for the work that they do, but I personally have not had an interest in dissecting and stuffing an animal.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier in the interview, and I think you emailed this to me, the Ken Norris Center is one of the only places that you can go see an albatross or an owl up close.
Right.
Apart from like a zoo. But I'm curious, why would somebody want to do that? Or what's the benefit in being very up close with an albatross or an owl? I mean, like, I would enjoy it, I know, but why do I enjoy that? What am I getting from that? Because it's not something that very clearly is fulfilling a need in my system, I think, but I'm sure there's something there.
Right. I think that also goes deeply into what I said earlier about why I like animals, which is just looking at them. And I think it's really the realization of the different creations that nature has, and just how vast those differences are with these creations. So an albatross wingspan is some ridiculous amount of feet, and to just see that right before your eyes, realize that there's this bird that flies over oceans, and the different interesting facts about it, like they're monogamous and they'll only have one mating partner, and if something happens to their partner, they won't find another one. And just learning about maybe where do people get their ideas of monogamy from, maybe from certain social structures of animals. And I think that it's important, because you can't love something and you can't appreciate it if you don't know what it looks like. So you can see on the internet, save the lion, save the safari, save this, save that, save the polar bears. You can see these sad photos of polar bears starving and being so skinny on these melting ice caps, but how can you really say I care about this if you're not already interested in it, or if you haven't seen it? So I think seeing these animals up close gives you a better understanding of why they're special, why they're important and unique, and why we have a sort of social responsibility to do what we can, at least individually, to be at least more mindful and share this space, which is the planet. And if you just never see that, and you live in a busy city and you don't have the privilege to go out and go hiking or go camp, but even if the point of that is that even if you go hiking and camping, you still won't see an animal that close, right? Because they run away and they're hard to see. So just seeing that animal up close can really, I think, ignite this sense of appreciation, and I think mostly just awe of the natural world and of this planet.
Definitely.
So I would love to give a little bit more information to people that would be interested in finding out about the Norris Center, because they do take volunteers and interns. We had like 30 last quarter, and a lot of community members are involved. Last quarter we put on like an art show that was called The Reserves of Inspiration. So that was just an art show where anybody from Santa Cruz or visiting could come and enjoy the art that students, staff, alumni, and community members made that was inspired by the UC reserves. So that was a great exhibit for people to see how these preserved lands can really positively affect your artistic side for expression. And there are just a lot of really great classes that people should take if they can. Like in fall of 2019, there's going to be the Natural History of Campus class, an ornithology class, which is the study of birds, the study of mammals called mammalogy class. And we're having some upcoming events like an alumni weekend, open house. We have workshops and we have awards, money that people can apply for grants and use towards a project. The Norris Center Student Project Award is due the 5th week of every quarter. You can get up to $1,000. There's a science and art residency program where artists get paid for their time. So like a faculty can be writing a textbook and they need someone who's going to do some illustrations for them. So these students can team up with the Norris Center and get paid for their work, and then it could be published in a textbook. We're also going to have 2 summer classes called Nature Illustration and the Natural History of the Campus class, and also come by to the Norris Center, which is located in Natural Sciences 2, and send us an email at norris@ucsc.edu. You can also just look up the Norris Center.ucsc.edu. And I would also just love to encourage people on a broader sense to go to city council meetings if they can. It's very interesting and fascinating to hear people speak about the city and their concerns. And I'd love to end a quote from Ken Norris,
Please.
Which I found online. So Ken Norris said, "I know in my bones that we are all of this home of ours. Crickets, columbines, jellyfish, redwood trees, frogs, lichens, desert moss, spiders, and all the rest. We are relatives, and my kinship with all the earth's biota, even the simplest flatworm, does not degrade me. Instead, it makes you and me miraculous. I know this because I walk in the midst of beauty and love, a perfection of sand, stones, water, and life."
Thanks for tuning in to This Just In from Outdoors. Check out our stories and past shows online at newsfromoutdoors.bandcamp.com. I've been your host, Alyssa Logalbo. Our headlines were produced by myself, Daniel Martinez, and Adelaide Carlson, with Suzanne Potter of the California News Service and Anthony Leiserowitz of the Yale Center for Climate Communication. The story on the Ken Norris Center for Natural History was produced by Daniel Martinez for KZSC's Talk About program. It was edited by Keith Rosendahl. You can hear the whole interview on KZSC's podcast feed at kzsc.fm/talk. Thanks again for listening. We'll be here next Thursday at 5 p.m. for another edition. Until then, we'll see you outdoors.
Just bees and things and flowers. Just bees and things and flowers. Sunshine.
Now, young fellas, been having a lot of fun around here today, haven't you? You know what makes this all possible? This forest around us. We should all be thankful for our forest.
just in.
From outdoors.